Okay, we are. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today here. Welcome to another session on online meetup group. Today's topic is very special and very dear for me, so I'm gonna not delve much into the topic, but just some housekeeping things. Those who have attended our sessions earlier, they know these sessions are recorded. Recording will be available on the event page probably 24 hours later the event. So feel free to come back and check on that one. On the right hand side, you should see a chat. Feel free to discuss anything about there. For your question answers, I'll recommend using the Q&A tab there. So add your question answers there, and at the end of the session, we will go over all the question answers and answer as much as possible. So other than that, just organizers from online meetup, myself Manik Magar, I am today's your host, and we have Royston, Angel, and Sandeep as co-hosts for not co-hosts, co-leaders for this group. So that's one in there. For the upcoming one, there is another meetup coming up on next Wednesday, July 29, sorry, Thursday, July 29, MuleSoft Interns Women Intake. So it's interesting. I would definitely suggest all of you to visit meetups.mulesoft.com/online group English for that and RSVP there, right? Other than that, I don't have any other things to talk, and I can just hand it over to Vijayan. Vijayan, I'm gonna stop sharing, and stage is gonna be yours.
Thank you, Manik. Right,
Feel free to
let me, yep, just give me a second. I hope everyone can see my screen. Manik, can you confirm that?
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Vijayan Ganapathy. I'm one of the product managers at MuleSoft, specifically focused on the B2B Solutions portfolio, under which Partner Manager is one of the products, right? There is a lot of content that we're going to cover today. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to get going straight away. So we will start today's session with a very quick overview of what B2B integrations are and what use cases they generally apply to. For those of you who are not very familiar about B2B integration standards, we'll then look at how this whole concept fits in the API-led connectivity approach that we are all familiar with. And then we'll get to know Partner Manager more in detail with a live demo of a common use case. And then towards the end, we'll take up any questions that get posted throughout the course of this presentation, right? And to start with, for those of you who are not familiar with B2B integration standards and concepts, we'll start with a very, very quick overview, right? We'll look at a very simple and a common use case involving a buyer. Think of a large retail chain like Target or Walmart, sourcing consumer goods like paper towels or like spinaches or apples or any producers from a supplier like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, or company called like Driscoll's. The buyer typically initiates the cycle by sending out a purchase order. The supplier receives the purchase order and they create a sales order in their ERP system, and then they confirm their intention to fulfill the order by sending an order acknowledgement back to the buyer. And then the seller then sends an advance ship notice to the buyer indicating when the goods will arrive. And after they deliver the products, the seller then sends an invoice to the buyer so they can get paid for the products that they sold. As we can see here, there are a bunch of transactions like orders, invoices, ship notices, remittance advices that get exchanged between the two companies that we're looking at in this example. And these transactions are oftentimes high volume in numbers because the buyers and suppliers, they basically kind of have hundreds and thousands of stores, and the supplier caters to a bunch of other buyers as well. So these are really high volume transactions, but oftentimes they are very predictable based on the supply and demand. There are also other players like the logistics carriers that we see at the bottom of this use case that physically move the freight from one place to another, right? To kind of maybe moving the stuff from the supplier's warehouse into a distribution center of the buyer, right? From a logistics standpoint. This may look very simple if you look at the interaction between just two companies, but in reality, the supplier will be selling their products to hundreds and thousands of other buyers as well. And the buyer in this example on the left side would be sourcing different types of products from hundreds and thousands of other sellers or suppliers as well. So as a result, the whole ecosystem becomes very complex and companies constantly exchange transactions between each other to power the supply chain of today's world, right? So again, like that could be interactions between any company to any company. So if we go 10,000 or 50,000 foot above, we will see the larger supply chain ecosystem in play with companies of different industries and businesses constantly exchanging transactions between each other. So with that understanding, let's now look at what options enterprises would have to handle these types of interactions or integrations with other business partners if the EDA standards did not exist, right? Uh, so what we're looking at here in this slide is a very small subset of businesses. Like I'm taking 5 random companies, A, B, C, D, and E, exchanging transactions with each other. As we can see clearly, each of these companies use different ERP and other backend systems in their enterprise landscape, right? Company A uses a Salesforce-based ecosystem, B uses an Oracle-based ecosystem, D uses SAP, and E uses, let's say, a mainframe system that is still powering their whole enterprise fabric. Now, if company A wants to send, let's say, an order or an invoice in their own canonical JSON message that they have defined within their enterprises. I mean, just to kind of take a step back, each of these companies, while they're using different ERP and other backend systems, they would have defined their own data models and structures for business objects such as orders, invoices, status, and any other object that they refer to within their enterprise systems. So let's say if A wants to send their own canonical JSON message to other companies that they do business with, like B, C, and D, and E. If they choose to send their data in their own format, the other companies would have to build a transformation map to convert A's message structure into the format of their respective backend systems, right? Which could be another custom JSON, which could be another custom XML, or it could even be a CSV or a copybook file format. Uh, or the other option would be A needs to transform their data into a format that is understood by the backend systems of their business partners. Either way, one company, either the sender, or the receiver, needs to bear the pain of building a map to transform the data from one format to another, right? Imagine doing that with hundreds and thousands of business partners. You're easily looking at building a complex one-to-one mapping to integrate with such large ecosystem of partners. So organizations definitely needed a better way of doing things in a more efficient way. And this is where EDA standards came into play 3 or 4 decades back. Now, organizations from different industries came together. This has all happened, like this is all a lot of history behind this whole thing. This all happened like 3 or 4 decades back, where representatives from different industries and different companies came together, formed a group to define the specifications of how every common type of business transaction should look like. It's not just purchase orders or PO acts or invoices. There are hundreds and hundreds of different transactions that are defined, and these organizations or these committees like ANSI, ASC, X12, or United Nations EDIFACT, they have defined how a particular message should look like. And there is a standardization that came into existence. And this is something that is universally accepted by companies of different industries, very widely adopted. So we should, so the way, as we can see in the slide, so now like as organizations are all following a very standard and widely accepted message format, necessarily have to send the data in their own defined data format. They typically leverage a software that allows them to convert their internal message formats into a standard format, and that is what gets sent to their partner ecosystem. And each of these companies, they have some sort of software that helps them to manage the transformation between EDI formats and their internal data formats. Again, like it's not to say that EDA is not a single and a golden standard set in stone. There are different variations and versions within EDI, but it's still something that is manageable versus having to build hundreds and thousands of unique transformation maps of varying complexities. So that's still even though there is still minor variations within EDI, it's still a very huge benefit that allows organizations to manage the B2B transactions exchange in a more efficient manner. With that understanding, I'm going to basically pass the slide, but the slide basically talks about a very small subset of uh, areas or business workflows in different industries that leverage EDA standards. So it's, again, the list is not exhaustive. So there is even more use cases that are powered by EDI and B2B integration standards. So as we can see here, we're talking about really important aspects like the transportation management, warehouse management, order to cash or procure to pay, and even healthcare has a huge dependency with that leverages EDA standards. So it's across. So you go anywhere in any industry, you will see a need to support EDI standards in some form or shape. And again, it's not about just the message formats and mapping between data formats, but B2B standards and protocols go beyond that in enabling automation of data exchange. The protocols like AS2 comes built in with security aspects, and each of these transactions and the specifications that are defined by X12 or Edifact, they have built-in compliance, right? If a message doesn't have a specific data element, it has rules associated to customers can kind of reject messages or validate to make sure they are compliant uh, according to the business agreement between the two companies. So it's not just the message formats and mapping and EDI standards, and it basically allows organizations to do their business more effectively and efficiently. All right. So, and as much as people have been predicting EDAs will die ever since XMLs came into existence 2 decades back, EDA has only grown stronger and stronger. We can clearly see that from the increase in the usage of EDA messaging year after year, as the other channels of engagements like APIs or B2B commerce channels are being more talked about. And as we all know, EDA has been in use for decades now, and we'll see why organizations are increasingly looking at transforming the way they integrate with their trading partner ecosystem. So let's start looking this slide from the far right? As organizations continue to digitally transform their enterprises by moving more into cloud-based SaaS applications like SAP, Salesforce, NetSuite, or whatever, right? And build an application network powered by an API-led strategy. They are looking for ways to efficiently extend the application network capabilities into the partner ecosystem on the far left side. Even though ADA is still going strong, organizations are finding themselves at an intersection where their partner ecosystem is asking to support API-based exchange of B2B messages as well as an alternate. While the legacy technology suite organizations have been historically using in their landscape handle EDIs really well, when it comes to support either with internal systems or with external partners using more of an API-based approach, the functionality offered by the legacy technology is very limited. Companies still have the option to continue using the existing solutions and leverage a modern iPaaS platform like Anypoint for API-based exchange, but that increases the total cost of ownership for them because they have two different integration platforms in their stack. And also from a visibility standpoint, it produces a lot of disjointed experience for the business users. They have to go to one platform if the transaction is getting exchanged through EDI. They have to go to another platform if the transaction is getting exchanged through APIs. So obviously they don't get a single pane of glass to manage B2B transactions exchanged through EDI and API in a single place. As a lot of customers are increasingly looking for a unified platform that offers support for both APIs and EDIs in the same platform. So with that understanding, let's now look at how this whole thing will look like in the context of API-led connectivity approach. B2B is at the edge of enterprises, providing the last mile connectivity between enterprise fabric and the partner ecosystem, and naturally fits in the experience layer of the API-led connectivity approach. Our B2B solutions at MuleSoft are built in a way to handle partner-specific message validations, transformations at this level, more as a natural extension of the downstream or upstream process and system APIs. In this slide, which represents a typical order-to-cash implementation, this customer receives B2B orders from three different channels. On the left side, we see orders coming from B2B commerce sites like Salesforce B2B Commerce Cloud, for instance. And they have a bunch of their traditional partners sending messages either in the X12 or EDIFACT format. So that's still a very huge portion of their whole business. And also we are seeing a partner six that is sending the orders through a custom JSON message format, more in the as a API based exchange. So and the way this is going to play out is going to be from the business perspective, regardless of whether the messages came from Salesforce B2B Commerce or through EDI or through an API call. The business cares only about the business value, right? They don't necessarily care if they came through EDI or API or a e-commerce portal, right? While we have the generic process APIs in the middle, orchestrating the order creation and updation, the components at the experience layer takes care of the transformation with their channel or partner-specific message structure. So this represents greater level of benefits like the increased agility, reusability, and all the other benefits API-led connectivity has been giving our customers. So let's now take a look at what Partner Manager offers in this context. Partner Manager basically sits between the enterprise application network powered by API-led strategy and the partner ecosystem on the left side. In addition to providing the ability to handle different message formats like X12 or EDIFACT, or the transfer protocols like AS2, FTP, SFTP, Partner Manager also provides several other additional out-of-the-box capabilities. Like for instance, Partner Manager is a completely configuration-driven and low-code approach to B2B integrations. Users do not have to write any piece of code except for the data weave mapping that they have to build in Studio. Partner Manager takes care of understanding the configurations that the users create to stitch an end-to-end B2B integration flow, and it leverages a template-based application stack that it automatically deploys to the runtime. So once you have your process flow in Partner Manager created, getting that deployed into a runtime plane is just a click of a button. And also, as Partner Manager has additional patch fixes or any minor version upgrades, the path to applying the upgrade is also made seamless. You just have to set a time aside and upgrade your test environment by clicking a single button, which automatically applies all the fixes or new features that are added with a new release. And you don't have to basically update any code or update any dependencies to take advantage of any upcoming upgrades or features. So, and obviously the core crux of Partner Manager is the dynamic validation, transformation, and routing of messages. So you could quickly build a message flow to receive an inbound order, transform it into a canonical JSON message, and then seamlessly send that to your process API. And on the same way, you could build a quick message flow to receive an outbound business message from the backend systems, convert them into X12 or EDIFACT, and then send it out to your trading partner through a supported B2B transfer protocol. So, and in addition, Partner Manager also provides out-of-the-box transaction tracking and visibility, acknowledgement generation, and reconciliation. And this is an area where we constantly innovate, and you'll see more innovations and more features coming in the next few months. So with that, so we are kind of at the end of more of the kind of tell part, and we're going to get into the show part of today's session. So I'm going to take a very quick and easy to digest use case for a quick live demo, right? So the use case that we are looking at is a very typical purchase order and purchase order acknowledgement flow. Mythical Suppliers is the name of the fictional company that is using Partner Manager to exchange transactions with two of their partners. Partner number one, Alps Incorporated. They are based in North America, exchanging transactions in Excel format. And they also do business cater to customers based in the Europe, and they have a customer called Camel that is based in the Europe that wants to exchange the transactions in Edifact standard. And Mythical Suppliers, as a customer of Anypoint platform, they have built a very sophisticated process and system layers that is able to orchestrate the order creation or send outbound order confirmations or acknowledgements back to partners. So they have a generic set of process APIs that understands their own defined custom canonical JSON message format, which is the PO JSON and PO ACK JSON that we see at the bottom. Uh, and as we can see, Alps Incorporated, they send an XML 850 in for the purchase orders, and they get an XML 855 as an outbound transaction confirming the order. Camel, they send an Edifact orders, and they get Edifact order response messages back in return when the order is confirmed in the ERP system. So before getting into the actual demo, I wanted to quickly introduce a few high-level concepts of some of the terminologies that we'll be talking throughout this demo. I'll introduce you to the concept called message flows, the routing configuration created in Partner Manager to receive a source message either from a partner or from a backend system, applying validations, transformation, and then eventually routing the translated message to the appropriate target, which could be a partner if it's an outbound message flow, or it could be a internal process API or other internal backend endpoint if it's an inbound flow. And this routing configuration created in Partner Manager is called as message flow. Message flow leverages several other components or building blocks the users can create within Partner Manager. Those components could either be a map, it could be a message type, it could be an endpoint of any type. Again, a very quick note, a message flow in Partner Manager does not get mapped as a one-to-one Mule app. It is merely a routing configuration, and Partner Manager has built-in templates that push the configurations referenced in a message flow to a set of generic endpoint apps to logically create the flow in the runtime. So with that understanding, I'll show a quick slide that talks about the high-level architecture of Partner Manager. So you have Partner Manager at the very top. It is a Anypoint Management Center component or that is in the control plane where users create configurations and message flows, and users can also monitor transactions activity from the Partner Manager control plane. When we then have a set of apps that get deployed by Partner Manager dynamically in the runtime that we see at the bottom. Any message received via a receiver endpoint app, and then it gets processed through a core routing engine, what we call as a document processing service, and then which applies the transformation, the validation, and any other processing related rules. And then when the message gets translated into the target format, if it's an inbound message, it could either, they typically come through one of these protocols into Partner Manager, and then Partner Manager, the translated data gets sent to the backend systems through one of these apps. So all of these apps are very generic, and they can dynamically connect to different endpoints of different partners or different backend systems. And on the other hand, for outbound messages, they basically get triggered from the backend systems, which could come from a process API. Partner Manager can receive such messages through one of these protocols, and then it dynamically applies the routing and validation to transform the outbound messages into one of the EDI or any B2B format that the partner wants to receive the data in, and they get sent back to the trading partners through one of these apps. So as I said, all of these apps are very generic, and they can be reused across message flows for different partners. So we're not basically translating each integration, each unique interface with each partner into a separate app, and we have a very generic architecture and design in place to make this whole story pan out. So with that understanding, we will now look at the steps that users typically need to follow to basically build the use cases that we are taking for today's demo. So just to give a quick kind of high level pitch on this slide. So basically, if you are using Partner Manager for the very first time, your organization or the platform administrator should do some initial setup of the environment to define the user permissions, to define if you're deploying to Cloud Hub or a hybrid instance. And they also, you have to take care of the vCore allocation to be applied on the applications Partner Manager will deploy. The second step is to basically define the configurations of your own organizations, right? It could mean defining or setting up your payload storage API, setting up the identifiers of your own organization, defining the different types of message types. Like in this example that we're going to look at, we'll basically be defining the X12, 850, 855, artifact order and order response, and the two internal PO JSON and PO ACK JSON canonical message structures. And we will also define the endpoints through which we'll receive data from partners, through which we will send the data to the process API, or how we will receive the data from the outbound process API for the PO ACK, and how we will send the translated outbound 855 order acknowledgement or the artifact order response back to the two trading partners that we'll be configuring. And then it follows with the configuration of the trading partner to define their identifiers and if there is any partner specific endpoint and any validation rules to apply to the specific partners. So that will be the step. And then doing the steps 1, 2, and 3 really sets the foundation. And then from there on, it's a matter of defining the individual message flows, right? Defining how you want to process an incoming 850 from apps, how you want to process the incoming artifact orders from Camel. And throughout the step, like as you create the message flow, you would be basically referencing the configurations that you created in steps number 2 and 3. So you can reuse the same configuration that you created for at the host or the partner level in any message flows that you will be creating for future partner onboarding. And then once you have the end-to-end message flow created, you will basically click a button and sit back and relax. Partner Manager is going to take care of deploying that into the runtime. And then once it completes the deployment, you can run some test files to validate, and then kind of basically completing the end-to-end cycle up to testing. So with that, we'll be sharing this slide deck at the end of the presentation later. And in the next few slides, I have some screenshots of some of the experiences, but we're going to look at it more in a live demo, but you could always refer back to the recording or the slide deck if you want to play with Partner Manager to build your first set of integrations in Anypoint Partner Manager. So I am going to basically now switch gears, and I'm going to stop sharing for now, and then I'll be sharing my entire screen as I walk through the whole setup of this use case. All right. Just give me a moment. I'll be kind of refreshing some of my connections. So all right. So I hope everyone can see my screen. Manik, if you can confirm.
Yes, we can see your browser.
Okay. All right. So I'm I'm in the Anypoint platform's homepage. So as I said earlier, Partner Manager is a component of the Anypoint Management Center. So you'll see that here. But what I'm going to do is, so I'll be switching gears between the presentation and my Partner Manager instance. So let's start with the step number 1, setting up the environment, right? I will basically show how that works. So it requires two different steps, right? First, the users that are going to use Partner Manager within the organization, they need to be assigned with the right permissions. To do that, your organization administrator typically goes into access management when it loads. So if it go to the users, select the user that you want to assign the permission, and then you'll see a section called Partner Manager right here. And you can select what environment that you want to set this user with, and then select one of these permissions. So let's say I want to assign the Partner Manager administrator permission for this user. So that kind of completes kind of assigning the permission so that it is the very first step. And the second step within the setting up the environment is defining where you want to deploy the B2B integration flows that you will be creating in Partner Manager. So typically, by default, Partner Manager is set to deploy to CloudHub. So if you go to the Partner Manager settings within the access management, your account administrator can select how they want to. So by default, as I said, it deploys to CloudHub. If you want to switch and change it to an hybrid instance, you will basically be clicking stop, in which takes you to another dialog where it allows you to select your on-premise instance. So for this demo, I'm going to continue using CloudHub. So you can select which version of runtime that you want to apply and what region do you want to deploy these applications deployed by Partner Manager. So you also get to select the vCores that you want to allocate for the different types of applications that Partner Manager will deploy. So once you have that defined, basically it completes this setup of the environment step. So then the next step in this equation is to configure the host organization. So it could sound like a lot of steps, but it is very simple and easy to follow if we kind of look back into the use case definition that we had. So basically, Partner Manager, by default, it doesn't offer any payload storage out of the box. So what we provide is API specification that customers can use to implement the payload storage API to connect with their own choice of storage. It could be a S3 bucket, it could be a relational database, or anything of the customer's choice. And we also provide templates and examples of a sample implementation that you can build and deploy to a Mule instance. And then the first step is to go into Partner Manager. I'll probably go to a very barebone new business group. So basically, when you get to the Partner Manager page on a very new environment, you'll basically see nothing, right? It just has the placeholders. So the first step here is to set up the payload storage API and then configure that. So you'll see the payload storage API configurations here at the very bottom. So you'll click create the configuration, and then let's say if you want to, let's say if this is the implementation base path of my payload storage API, I'll basically be configuring that. And if that is protected with any of these authentication methods, you'd basically be configuring those values. So that kind of completes the configuration of your payload storage API, which is strongly recommended as the first step in the host page. The second step is to configure the host identifiers, right? If you are receiving an XML message from your partners, you basically want to kind of identify yourself, right? It's more like, think of it as the to address in a mail envelope for the messages that you're getting, or the from address on the messages, mails that you're posting out to your business partners. So you basically get to create the identifiers as the next step. So I'll probably start with defining the X12 interchange identifier for my own organization. Maybe I'll call it as this the organization, the identifier that my organization uses. So I get to create that. So I can create the next set of identifiers as well. And if I am using AS2 as the communication protocol with some of my partners, which in this case we do for the integration with the two partners that we're going to onboard. So I will basically set my AS2 identifier as well. So it kind of completes the identifiers section. And you can either create and import your certificates here, or you could do that in the message flow creation step, which I'll defer it to the later step. The next step is to basically define the message types. So in the example that we are seeing for this demo, we have two partners sending two different inbound EDI messages, one that is sending X12 850 and the other that is sending Edifact D97A orders. And then they also receive outbound messages of two different types. And then within my internal entity, I have just one internal purchase order JSON message, and I have one single outbound purchase order acknowledgement. So basically, for the use case that we are implementing, we are looking at types. So I will start with the message type that defines my inbound purchase order JSON schema, right? Just to go back to the use case example I'm talking, we are kind of going to set up this message type as the first step. So to do that, I will go to the message types, click new, and then it is a target at my own organization. So it's a target for an inbound message. So I'll select that, and it's a JSON. And then I will basically be uh, selecting uh, the JSON schema of this message type. So let me get that message type. So let me click. This is the inbound purchase order schema that I'm importing. So I can give it a meaningful name so that I can use that in the message flows that I'll be creating in to define the end-to-end integration. And similarly, I can create the messages that I'm going to likely receive from my trading partners. So I'll be selecting a receive from partners. So I'm going to receive an X12 4010 850 from some of my partners, right? And these are completely reusable. You don't have to do time you onboard a partner that's 850. So you do that just once. And we also provide, I mean, even though the X12 is a great standard that defines how a 850 should look like, customers basically deviate from the base schema definitions. Sometimes organizations may want to switch a mandatory schema into an optional or optional to mandatory, or increase or decrease the length limits. So they can typically want to customize the schema, and that is something that is supported. And we have templates published in Exchange that kind of guides you on how you can take a base schema and customize it to tweak it to meet the specifications of your trading partner. So for the sake of simplicity in this demo, I'm going to select the base or the standard schema. And I will also create the inbound Edifact orders for the partner that is based in Europe. So I'll select the version, and I'll select the message type, which is orders in this case, and then save. And I'll also be defining the message types for the outbound, the data that I'm sending back to the trading partners. So for ads and other partners that are based in the US or North America, I will be sending them an 4010 855. And here also for the outbound messages, also you can customize the schemas so that the final validation happens against the custom schema. So I will choose to go with the standard schema for this. And then I'll select the send to partners. I'll define the Edifact order response for the partners based in the Europe, the version that they typically use, and I'll select the order response message type. So basically, we just completed defining the different types of message types that I'm going to use for this demo. And I also should select the source message for the outbound, but basically that you can kind of create those building blocks as message types. And if I want to create the endpoint for the process API, to send the incoming purchase orders to the backend systems. I'll be defining a targeted host endpoint. I'll select the endpoint protocol, and maybe if let's say I'll give it a meaningful name like HTTP inbound process API, and I'll basically be uh, defining the URL of the process API endpoint. Let's say something like this. Select the authentication type. So it could be whatever that is set to protect the API endpoint. So that basically gets created as a source or the targeted host endpoint. So basically you get to do all of that configurations within Partner Manager. So in the interest of time, I'm going to basically switch gears and take you back to an environment where all of these configurations are already created, right? I'll go to the other business group where I have all of these configurations created. So in this group, I have a set of endpoints to which I'm sending the inbound purchase orders, set of endpoints to which I'm sending other types of messages into the backend systems. So it's a completely configured and live environment that I'm going to use to continue this demo. The other thing that I wanted to quickly also highlight here is against each of the different components or the configurations that you create in Partner Manager, you will also see the number of message flows that are referencing those endpoints. So from a dependency management standpoint, if you want to understand how many flows and what are the different partners that are likely to be impacted if a change needs to happen in this endpoint, so it provides you with that kind of a flexibility to kind of understand the dependency. And if you want to make a change, you get to know what impact you're potentially looking at, right? So this kind of completes the configuration of the host organization. And the next step is basically creating the partner configuration, setting up their identifiers. And if you're going to interact with the partner specific endpoints, you could also define them in the partner's profile. And you also get to create the validation settings if you want to send an acknowledgement back, what kind of delimiters that you want to apply in the outbound EDA messages. All of that is something that you will do in the partner's profile. So I'll quickly uh, go into one of the partners of our demo, which is I'll select Alps Incorporated, and you basically get to define their profile here, right? In the partners page, you basically can create a new partner that kind of takes you through a wizard where you can define all of the configurations pertaining to the partner. So if I go to the Alps Incorporated, I have defined their AS2 identifiers, the different types of identifiers that they use in their documents. We have their certificates, and for the AS2 messages that are going out to them to send the 855s or the 997 acknowledgements. So I have defined the partner specific endpoint right here. So you could create those endpoints right from the screen, and you can select the protocol and define the configuration of those endpoints. So no coding, no kind of dragging and dropping connectors. So all of this is kind of made very easy and intuitive. And this section is where you will basically define their validation rules. Right? If you're receiving an inbound 850 from a partner and you don't necessarily care about if a particular data element exceeds the length limits prescribed in the XML schema, you can flip those settings right here, and they get applied dynamically to the processing in the runtime. Similarly, for outbound messages, you can kind of control a lot of the validation rules, or if you want to kind of change the delimiters that you want to apply in the outbound messages sent to the partners, you could do all of that here. And if you want to kind of change the control numbers of the documents that get exchanged with the partners, let's say you're moving from a legacy B2B platform manager, and you want to start the control numbers from where you're currently processing to primarily prevent duplication. So you could kind of initialize or change the control numbers as you wish right in the screen. So that kind of covers the aspect of configuring the trading partners. We'll now go to the step where you basically create the message flow, right? In the interest of time, I'm going to just take you into one type of message flow. So if you go to the message flows, you get to see all of the configured or deployed message flows that are running in this environment. And if you want to create a new message flow, you have to basically select if you want to, if it's an inbound message flow, which in this case would be a message flow to receive B2B messages from a partner. So let's say I select this. So I'll probably pick a random customer that is not part of today's demo. So let's say I'm selecting a customer called Rocky Mountain. So it takes you to a wizard where you need to basically select the configurations that you want to kind of stitch the whole end-to-end processing. You basically, the first step will be to select the how you're receiving this message. So I can either choose a partner specific endpoint, or I can choose a generic endpoint like an AS2 listener, that you have one endpoint through which you receive data from multiple partners. So let's say I pick this uh, as the receiving endpoint. And then it automatically detects that this partner does not have an AS or a certificate, which you can kind of add or upload here. And then the next step is basically to select what type of message you're expecting from this partner. Let's say I select 850 as the message type, which I already defined in the previous screens. And if I want to send an automatic acknowledgement back to the partner, I can select, and it prompts you to select the endpoint to which you want to send this 997 acknowledgement to. So already created, and if not, you can also always start your journey with in the message flow, and you have the path to create the endpoints and other types of configurations right from the message flow screen. And then the map is something that you build in Studio, and you have to basically import the DataWeave script. And to make that also easy, we have templates and examples published in Exchange that you can use to jumpstart your journey to create EDI transformation maps for Partner Manager. So I'll skip that step for now. And basically, it's an inbound 850. So I basically, it gets translated into an inbound PO ACK, the canonical JSON message in the host profile. And then this message basically needs to be, the translated JSON message needs to be sent to the endpoint of my inbound process API. So it's already created and running in this URL. So I basically just pick and select, right? You don't have to kind of recreate all of these configurations. They're completely reusable across different message flows. So as you keep kind of completing each of these steps, you basically end up creating an end-to-end message flow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show a message flow that receives the inbound 850 from our US-based trading partner. So they basically send the messages through a generic AS2 connection that gets applied, and we automatically generate and send an outbound 997 functional acknowledgement back to their AS2 endpoint. And I have a data weave map that I have built in. I'll quickly show how the experience looks like. So you will basically, if you leverage the template and the examples published in Exchange, so it comes pre-built with the actual components. So all you need to do is on the target, if you're creating an inbound message flow, you basically define the metadata type, which will be nothing but the same JSON schema or the XML schema that you import in Partner Manager. And it automatically kind of presents you with the ability to graphically map messages. Like, for example, if you want to map the BEG1 segment, which is the transaction purpose code, or the BEG3, which is the PO number, you basically just drag and drop. And this experience, this group is very familiar with, so I don't intend to go deep into this. So basically, the mapping of EDA transactions is similar to how you basically map an API request or a Salesforce object, or anything. It's a very familiar data weave based experience. So I'll come back here. So that's what it does. And this 850 coming from apps, after it gets translated into this JSON canonical structure, it gets sent to the process API to further create the order in the ERP system. And on the same lines, I'll go to the outbound 855. So basically, the outbound 855 is more of a reverse of the inbound, right? So it basically originates from the backend system when the order is confirmed. So there is a canonical PO ACK JSON message that comes. And what we see here is this message flow is configured to receive that message call from the backend system. So they can do a HTTPS post to this URL that Partner Manager has stood up when this message flow was deployed. And this endpoint for any type of basically the backend system needs to just simply post the JSON PO ACK message to this URL slash the message type. So I'll be simply posting a JSON message into this URL, which makes its way into the outbound message flow. And we have a comprehensive outbound message routing framework to dynamically understand the sender receiver ID and route the message to the appropriate message flow. So once the message is kind of makes its way into this message flow, it's another data we map. It's the reverse of an inbound. So basically, the source is a JSON message, and the target is an EDI 855 in this case. So it gets built in Studio and gets imported here. And this is where you basically will kind of select what type of message it is translating into. In this case, it's an X12 855. You select and you get to see all the configured message types in this environment. You can select whatever you want. And if you are expecting a functional acknowledgement to come back from the partner to confirm that they have received and accepted the message, so you can select that and select how you are expecting the functional acknowledgement to come back, which could be the same endpoint through which you are getting other types of inbound messages from the partner. And what Partner Manager also allows you is to define when you want to be concerned if you don't receive the 997 back. Let's say if you're sending a critical transaction that you're expecting a 997 back within an hour, or if you're sending a not so time sensitive document like an invoice that you are expecting a 997 to come back in a day, you can configure them. And Partner Manager automatically tracks the status, right? When it receives the inbound 997s in response to an outbound document that was sent from Partner Manager, it automatically reconciles the acknowledgement and updates the status of the outbound transaction. And if it hasn't seen the 997 coming back from the partner within that stipulated time, it flags the status of the outbound message as overdue. Or even if the partner is sending a 997 back, and if they say that they're rejecting the message because you missed including a mandatory data element, or if you included a data element that exceeded the length limits. So Partner Manager also tracks the rejections, and you will be able to see those statuses as well in the activity tracking. So the crux of it is like basically you get to configure all of the different configurations, and then this message flow is set to send this data to the partner through an AS2 connection. I know we have just 6 more minutes, so what I'm going to do is the experience of Edifact message flow is very similar. So I will quickly take the Camel inbound orders. So they are also sending it through the same AS2 endpoint through which Alps is sending the external messages. That is perfectly fine. And it's an inbound orders, and you can send a control functional acknowledgement in return. And what you'll see here is basically, even though the source is different, it gets mapped into the same target message type, and it gets sent to the same process API. So basically aligning with the whole API-led connectivity approach. So you are basically abstracting the partner specific aspects of the message processing at the receive section, and you basically funnel everything through the same generic set of process layer that you have in your enterprise. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically act as Alps incorporated. So I have set up a payload. It's an EDA message. Those of you that haven't seen an EDA message, think of it more as some kind of a positional or a delimited or a message type. So it basically defines what are the different items that this customer wants to order, and what are the different quantities and where they want to be, when to ship the messages into, and so on and so forth. So I'm sending this message. I'm going to call the PO number as meetup1, and I'm going to post this message into the generic AS2 endpoint that Partner Manager is running. So when I do that, like, it's not me, it's the Alps incorporated that is automatically sending this purchase order payload. So it's going to come into Partner Manager in a moment. So I successful MDN back. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to send an edifact order message with PO numbers meetup O2, and this message contains two orders in the same file. So there is a meetup 2 where this customer is ordering some hardware products with my company. And there is also another order in the same payload, which I call with the PO number as meetup 3. And that also is kind of ordering certain quantities of different items that I sell. So I will send that to the same endpoint that to which Alex was sending the external 850s. If I go back to Partner Manager, basically activity is the page where you manage and monitor the transactions. So let's start with what I received, right? So as we can see, at just a minute back, I received an inbound 850 from Alps that was successfully processed. And I also received a artifact orders message that contained two orders that are also successfully processed through the message flow. So I can view the payload that was sent, that was received from the partners. I can view the acknowledgement that was sent. And I have, like, in the interest to just make this demo simple, I'm writing this translated JSON messages into an custom MySQL database. So if I go and query my database, I get to see three orders, right? One order with the PO number as meetup1, and I get to see the translated JSON message as the EDI external message got through the transmission to JSON in Partner Manager. And I also see the two that I received from Camel. The source of these messages are Edifact, but eventually they got converted into the same canonical JSON message that my process understands. So, and we also see that there is an outbound purchase order acknowledgement going back. So we get the generic canonical JSON message coming from the process API that either gets converted into 855 or Edifact order response, depending on the message flow configuration and the partner. If I go back to the activity and select my outbound transactions, so I see that I sent an outbound PO ACK for the order meetup1 to Alps Incorporated, which is the source of this message is a JSON canonical message that came from the backend system. And it was routed through the 855 message flow for this partner, where it got converted into an X12 855 document, and it was sent to the partner through the AS2 connection. And if I come back to the activity, and maybe if I go back to the outbounds, I also see that the message that came from the backend system for Camel Incorporated, where it went through a transformation and it went out to the partner as an Edifact message, as against the extra 855 that was sent to Alps Incorporated. So the summary here is, like, you get to basically see all of the transactions activity. You can view the payload, and you can do a bunch of operational aspects. So that kind of takes us to the end of this demo. I know I didn't reserve much time for questions and answers, but basically I hope the team found this informative as to how you can build quick integrations and connect with your trading partners through EDI messaging standards. So we'll share the slide deck, so it has some additional screenshots and some additional context as well that you can refer back, and you can probably always reach out through any of the community channels if you have further questions that we can address. So Manik, are there questions that you think?
A lot of questions are there,
Oh,
Vijayan.
okay.
I took the liberty of answering few of the simple questions just in the interest of time.
Okay.
But we are right
Sure.
at the end of that time. If you have few minutes extra, we can go over of the few. We do have to respect people's time. If anybody want to drop, feel free. But
Yeah, I
let's
can
answer
stay
few questions.
for some more time. Maybe
Okay.
maybe those that need to drop, they can always watch the recording and kind of
Yes, it will be on the
if
recorded. So
that
thank you
works.
very much, guys. If you want to drop, uh, and just visit back on the event page for the recording slide. So quick few questions, Vijayan, which I think are good there. One of the question was the vCore allocation. How is that done? Is it partner manager level or the partners configured or the message flow types? I know you showed that access management screen where there were like vCores assigned. Can you slightly elaborate
Yeah.
how
So
that
so
works?
it's something that is done at the environment level. But again, we do understand that like there is no one size fits all, right? You could have a partner that is heavy in AS2 and light in SFTP. So this is an you could basically what you configure in the partner management page is what is used by partner manager when apps are deployed. And again, like I said, like it's not a one-to-one mapping of message flow into the apps. The apps are very generic in nature. So that's how it works. And more changes on how the vCore allocations happen, etc. Kind of evolving in the coming days.
All
I
right.
don't know if
Uh,
that answered the question. Maybe if you want to add anything, Malik, please feel free.
no, I think that's pretty transparent to users. Like you said, it's not one-to-one mapped. Flow is not mapped to an app, so don't consider your vCore as a flow mapping there. The in your
Yeah,
one of the diagram where you had that
yeah,
receiving
yeah. You
endpoints
you
and the
could
send
have one
endpoint.
message
Yeah,
flow with just one partner that sends thousands of transactions every hour, or you could have one transaction in a row. At the end of the day, the vCore is driven more by the transaction volume that you're expected to handle than the number of partners or the number of message flows.
all
That
right.
will be it's pretty similar and standard to the way the platform is sized.
Yeah. Another question is I lost network here for a few minutes, probably. So I don't know if you
Okay.
showed this already, but can we have like multiple interchange ID for host organization? Like, can we send, receive our messages using multiple interchange IDs? Maybe you mentioned that when showing the host configuration page on the
Yeah, you
identifiers.
can. But for inbound messages, we currently have like any messages that are configured for the different identifiers. They're all kind of processed through a single message flow for inbound. But it's an area where we will make changes that allows more kind of routing messages based on different combinations of the interchange and group center IDs. But today you can have multiple interchange identifier combinations for the partners, and that is
Right.
supported. So that'll be some enhancements in the way you can kind of be flexible in routing messages from different identifiers into different flows or mapping.
Yeah. Oh, as you are speaking about the future enhancements, I will just add probably a safe harbor statement there, just to
Sure,
consider what is
absolutely. Yeah.
available
So
at this
everything
moment in the product.
correct. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's pretty much of it. We had a lot of questions. So what I can do is at the end of the session, I can download all those questions. And if you have time, Vision, I can
Sure.
send those questions to you to answer offline. And if you send me those guys, I can send all those questions and answers to everyone who attended this session today to have a follow-up, right? So with that, I think I will conclude this session. It was a very good session,
Yeah,
Vijayan.
I
Lot
think
of
one
content.
more thing.
Huh?
I think there is one question about like using NoSQL for the persistent layer for the payload storage. That should be perfectly fine. Partner Manager doesn't care what is the underlying storage that is behind the payload storage API. So anything
Yeah,
that works and Partner Manager basically interacts with the API and doesn't care about the underlying storage. And there was
right.
another question on trial. If you are a customer, I would recommend talking to your account representative. If you're a partner, I think probably the channels team should be able to get that for you.
Right. Okay, that's cool. Is there
Uh,
any other question you think quickly can be said? If not, we are
you know,
fine. That's okay. There are a lot of questions. It was like a
okay,
lot of
sure,
content. I really enjoyed it.
sure,
It's
okay,
probably
good,
too much to grasp in just one sitting. So guys, please feel free to watch the recording again to get all the content. The recording will be available on the same event page sometime later today or check back after tomorrow, and you will have it. And like Vijay mentioned about the slides will also be available on the same event page. So you will have all the content and the resources available on the event page. So with that, Vijayan, thank you very much for this amazing session. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
thanks
everyone.
everyone for
Yep.
joining. Hope you stay safe there. Bye bye.
All right. Thanks.